from spring break. So before we introduce our guest speaker, a couple of quick announcements. So I got a few emails from people who did not have a paper to review for the peer reviews that were due today. I humbly apologize. It was partly my fault and partly your classmates' fault for not turning in a paper. What I told people who emailed me was to just choose one from that list at your choice, any animal you see fit, to submit a peer review. So I'll give you guys that didn't have one to peer review till the end of the week to turn those in. No points deducted. And I'm sorry about that, but let this be a warning to those of you that didn't turn in your papers. You're not going to get a peer review and the whole system starts to sort of fall apart, right? You should definitely still turn those in if you haven't yet, because you'll need to turn in all of those writing assignments to get your WI credit. So even if it's late, definitely turn it in, and that goes for the writing assignments, the peer reviews, all of it needs to be turned in for you to get that WI credit. Another order of business, on the schedule there was a quiz that was to be taken today. However, there was no quiz posted. So we just wanted to make you guys sweat as much as possible over spring break. So we sort of dropped the ball on that. It didn't get posted. What we're going to do is post it ASAP today, tomorrow, soon? Thursday. And then it'll be due the following Tuesday. So it'll be due next week, Tuesday. The other thing that means is that we don't have a quiz to review in section today. So would you guys rather take section off and work on your final projects that are due at the end of the month? Or option B, behind the closed door? Okay, so we'll take section off today. You guys have a free pass. We'll review that quiz next week in section. But please remember that your final projects are due at the end of the month. So if you haven't already gotten started on that, come to the
Party is April.
question.
You mean the end of April, right?
End of April, right?
Because,
We're not in April yet.
because it's still March and I was like, end of the month. Like.
Okay, yes. What's that? Yeah, Thursday you have free also.
No recitation.
Right. A great time for office hours if you want to come see me about your projects or anything else. I'll be here, I'll be available. So if you've been dying to come see me but haven't had time, here's a great opportunity.
Same thing with me today.
Same with Dr. Hunter today after
I'll
class.
be in my office 1:30 to 3:30.
She'll be in her office if you want to come bug her. She's got a cool office. You should check it out if you haven't seen it. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Awesome. Okay, well, I'm so happy to introduce Dr. Sheldon Plentovich. I've known Dr. Plentovich for a long time, dating to when she was a professional kite surfer, and she gave it up to get her PhD in, she actually studies the birds and the bees, is what she's an expert on. So if you have questions about the birds and the bees, you can direct them over here. She works for Fish and Wildlife now, she works for the feds, and she's involved in conservation projects all over the Pacific, and she does some really amazing things, and we're excited to learn more about them today. Take it away.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. Can everybody hear me in the back? Okay. And hopefully if I gesticulate wildly, this doesn't get weird. We'll see. So I'm going to talk today about ecological restoration. I'm going to use some case studies from the Pacific Islands. I'm going to start by just talking for a second about U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because I know it's confusing to hear Division of Land and Natural Resources, DFW, Division of Fish and Wildlife, which are both state organizations, whereas U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal organization. So I'm just going to talk just for a second about that. And then focus in on ecological restoration, what it is, and try to better understand it through using 3 case studies from the Pacific Islands. So Ka'ena Point, which I know many of you are familiar with, Johnston Atoll Ant Control, and then the Nihoa Miller Bird Translocation. And then we'll end with some discussion. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is under the Department of the Interior. The mission is working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, and plants, and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. And what that actually means, how it translates is that Fish and Wildlife helps protect a healthy environment for people, fish, and wildlife, helps to conserve areas of high conservation value, migratory birds, endangered species, certain marine mammals, and freshwater and migratory anadromous fish. And there's a bunch of different divisions within Fish and Wildlife. So I'm in Ecological Services. I'm the Pacific Islands Coastal Program Coordinator, so I work with mostly partnering with other people. And that's included under Ecological Services, along with endangered species, environmental quality, habitat and resource conservation. It also includes fish and aquatic conservation, National Wildlife Refuge System, migrant birds, law enforcement, and international affairs. So as you all fledge out into the world and start to look for jobs, this is one of your options. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm with the Coastal Program. The one in the Pacific Islands is one of 26 throughout the US, all in coastal areas. And it's just a tool for voluntary, collaborative, citizen and community-based habitat restoration projects. So the 3 projects I'm going to present today are all Coastal Program projects. We're strategically focused. We have not very much money, so we usually put a little bit of money, seed money, into projects that are innovative and novel. And it's me and then 4 biologists on our neighbor islands. Okay, so any questions about that? Okay, so now on to the meat of what we're going to talk about today. What is ecological restoration? And I thought we could start the discussion by just thinking about definitions that you see used in the literature today. So the first one, ecological restoration is the return of an ecosystem to a close approximation of its condition prior to disturbance. Second definition, process of repairing damage caused by humans to the diversity and dynamics of indigenous ecosystems. Third definition, intentional activity that initiates or accelerates the recovery of an ecosystem with respect to its health, integrity, and sustainability. And then the last definition, practice of renewing and restoring degraded, damaged, or destroyed ecosystems and habitats in the environment by active human intervention and action. So what do all of these have in common? Are there any words or ideas or intentions that these have in common?
Restoring the environment.
Restoring the environment. Okay, what else?
Human disturbance.
Human disturbance. Very good. What else? Anything else? As I try to figure out how to use the laser. So yeah, like human disturbance, obviously we're not going to restore ecosystems unless there's been some disturbance. So just keep these definitions in mind, think about them. You know, there's not one agreed upon definition. Probably the most popular one is from Society for Ecological Restoration. But just think about that as we move through these. So in terms of restoration tools, think of an area that's degraded. And since all of you are familiar with Kind Point, think of that hellhole in between where you park your car and you walk to the boulder barricade, right? Where there has been severe ecological degradation due to off-road vehicles and God knows what else happens out there. So tell me some tools that could be used to restore that area.
Barricades to stop the
Boulder
vehicles?
barricades, man. The guy, Dave Smith at DLNR, was in a war with the public with that boulder barricade. He would put big rocks there and people would just take them out. And then the next week he would put more big rocks there and he was like, I don't care how long it takes. The rocks are gonna get bigger. What else besides that? Yes?
Planting fish
Yeah, like outplanting native vegetation. Public education. Not that I'm bitter about that part or anything. What else? What about, like, there's hardly any topsoil there, right? And there's a little bit of topsoil left, so erosion control could be something. You guys said most everything else, revegetation, outplanting, that's a really common one. Fencing, same thing as boulder, you know, using a barrier. Your fence can be a bunch of big ass rocks if that's what you want. Doesn't have to be regular fencing. Removal of invasive species, which, you know, is at some point going to be important for that area, but we have other problems right now. And then, you know, once you get a place that's free of predators, you can think about translocating or reintroducing some native species. Okay, so the goal of ecological restoration is to return a community or ecosystem to a condition similar in ecological structure and function that existed prior to this disturbance or degradation. Now remember this, because this slide is going to keep popping up in this presentation. The assumption for this is that we know the ecological structure and how the system functioned prior to degradation. Is that always true? No. How come?
Well, because we weren't there before we started destroying it.
That's right. That's right. We weren't there. Now, if you're looking at a fairly pristine area that's functioning fine, and say you have an introduction of rats, and then all of a sudden all your seabirds are extirpated, then you can get rid of those rats. You kind of knew what was happening before, so that would actually meet this goal. But you're right, in a lot of cases, we don't really know what we're dealing with, and especially on Pacific Islands. So is this part going to be reviewed? Anthony, is this going to be reviewed for them?
No, we haven't done birds yet.
Okay. So in the Hawaiian Islands, we have 142 known bird species. That's from the fossil record, and living or extant species. 71 of those went extinct after arrival of Polynesians, 24 after arrival of Europeans. We have 45 that are remaining, 45 taxa, you know, species, subspecies, and 31 of those are listed as threatened or endangered. And we are going to lose them all, except for 3 that are getting some kind of immunity towards avian malaria. And hopefully we're not going to lose the miller bird and some of the northwestern Hawaiian Island ones. But we are in a bad, bad place. These are some of the birds we lost, the mamo. This is the Laysan apapane. That was only found in Laysan. It's really orange. If you see it at Bishop Museum, it's really striking how different it was than everything else. And then this is the moanalu, which we'll talk about in a second. So we've lost a lot of these birds that we've lost, you know, were honey creepers that had bills that were very fascinating and were co-evolved to pollinate specific plants. So this bird would stick that bill down into that plant and get popped on the head by that so it could transfer pollen from one place to another. So we've lost, you know, a lot of those linkages in the ecosystem. And just for fun and kind of sad for me, anyway, and I'm sure some of you, some of the extinct species were freaking amazing. Like we had this giant flightless browsing goose called the moanalu that they think kind of filled a niche similar to mammals. Like, I don't know, that would have been so amazing to see. We had 4 ibis, which, I mean, this is sort of a drawing of it in the past, or in the back here. 9 species of rail, which are little birds that kind of look like chickens, and they used to be really widespread in Pacific Islands, and we've lost, I think, over 90% of them because they were really easy pickings when people first got to the islands and when people introduced cats and dogs and other things. 2 stilt owls. What the hell? Owls with big old long legs. A sea eagle. And then 1 million fascinating invertebrates that I'm not going to get going on too much. But here's just one example. Has anyone been to New Zealand and seen the weta? the giant, so it's this big weird looking cricket, and it is, as you can see, as big as your hand. And so we had a similar species here. So we've lost all of that. Okay, let's move on to the first case study. How many people, who has not been out to Kaena Point? Some of you. Okay. Now's a good time to go, because the albatrosses are like this big, and they're just, the chicks are just all down, and they all look like they're highlighted. They've been to the salon or something. They're super cute right now. Okay, so the problem at Kaena, now this is the point. We're not talking about the state park area that I'm so bitter about, right? We're talking about the point proper now. The problem is there is significant ecological damage caused by introduced mammalian predators. The nesting seabirds were decimated. There was like nothing left because of mongooses, cats, dogs, and rats, which were getting the smaller seabirds, which are not present there. And native plant seeds and flowers were depredated by rats and mice. So, even so, there were some birds trying to nest there, and this is our most common nesting seabird in the Hawaiian Islands, the wedge-tailed shearwater, which nests in burrows. And so those birds were kind of nesting, but nothing else. And then once Kaena Point was closed to vehicles, Laysan albatrosses, this is like the gangster Laysan albatross that you can use. Whoa. He's so cute, I lost my train of thought. So once Kaena Point was closed to vehicles, these guys started trying to nest, but they weren't successful because there were still a lot of predators. And then the state came in with wildlife services, and they started shooting, trapping, killing mongooses, cats, and dogs. And so then there were some chicks that showed up. The chicks at Kaena now are a little bit younger than this, but all of that down, they look kind of like this, but all over that down. So then there were some chicks. And at that point, people were like, hey, this is an amazing opportunity, right? We've had these seabirds that are rare in the main Hawaiian Islands colonize this area. So let's see, what we can do for this species. So started monitoring intensively. This is the grid that we still use to monitor. And we decided to put in this predator-proof fence that had never been used in the US before. This is it as it was under construction. And then inside the fence, we removed all the predators, every single one of them. And then we sat back and we monitored and we watched what happened. And so with the shearwaters, so this is when predator control started. This is when the fence or the access was closed, so people couldn't drive around that whole point anymore. This is when predator control started. And then the fence went in about 2010, predators were removed, and now we're just seeing it go up and up, and it continues to go up. Sorry, I apologize that this is only to 2013, but it's been record every year since then. And same thing with the albatrosses. So started, after predator control, 2004 we had 20, 25, and then once the fence was in, predators were removed inside, we've seen increases every year. So, predator-proof fences work. We've seen it here and elsewhere. They increase nest success of Laysan albatross and wedge-tailed shearwater at Kaena. They increase nutrient loads. So the one thing I didn't mention is we're monitoring everything. And obviously I don't have time to go into it today, but trust me when I say we're monitoring nutrient loads, and we've seen that increase, because birds are bringing marine-derived resources and pooping them out, and in the form of guano there at Kaena. So that's not a surprising result. Plant density and distribution, still monitoring that. We haven't been, we've been monitoring it regularly, but the data haven't been analyzed. And we're hoping for possible colonizations by other seabirds that are less tolerant to predators. So for example, the Bulwer's petrel that you see here in the back is a small little bird. It's like this big. And so rats can eat the eggs. Now that the rats are gone, we're hoping that we get some of these guys colonizing the area. So the cons for the predator fence, it's expensive and it's a limited area, And it takes a lot to maintain it, as we're seeing right now. So my question for you is Kaena Point restored? The area inside the fence. So let's revisit the goal of restoration, which is to return a community or ecosystem to a condition similar in ecological structure and function to that existing prior to site disturbance or degradation. So what do you think? Is Kaena restored?
It's getting there, but maybe not quite yet.
Okay. He said it's getting there, but maybe not quite yet. It's like moving in the right direction. Does anyone else have thoughts on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, Kate has brought up
Right. And there are some things that are absent from, things that we know are absent in terms of groups of animals, but we don't know what they are. And so what I mean by that is invertebrates. There's hardly any native invertebrates out there. I sample them every 6 months, and we find virtually nothing, and that's native. And since the fence went in, we used to have yellow-faced bees, Hylaeus, cutest bees ever, if you've ever seen them. And they've disappeared, and we don't understand why. So that's kind of a big gap, and that's not something that we know if the predator fence is going to address. It's nice that the mice and the rats aren't eating all the seeds and eating flowers, so maybe they have more floral resources, but there's other things at work. So we answered that question, what's missing? There's some invertebrates missing. So what are some possible approaches in general, not just at Kaena Point, but if a species is missing, what are some possible approaches to address that?
Replacing it with a similar species.
Yeah, called an ecological analog, and we'll talk more about that. So she said replace maybe a species that's extinct with a similar species that could play the same role potentially. Anything else? Yes.
That's why we see a lot of these foreign birds around. Some of them were brought in to replace Hawaiian native species that went extinct.
Yeah, I saw something in a paper from the 1800s that said, if you're traveling to a far-off land and you hear a bird with a beautiful song, bring it back, because all our birds are extinct in the lower elevations because of avian malaria. Okay, any questions about Kaena Point? No, okay. All right, let's move on to the second case study. Does anybody know what kind of bird this is?
Albatross?
Nope.
Tropic bird.
Tropic bird! What kind of tropic bird?
Red-tailed.
A red-tailed tropic bird. Okay, so this is a project from Johnston. Johnston Atoll is this really freaky place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where they used to decommission chemical weapons. And it is like really weird to go there. You're walking down the road and you're walking past the sign that says, warning, asbestos dump. And then you walk a little further and it's like, warning, large munitions dump. And you're just like, am I getting cancer just being on this island? But so far so good. We've had people out there for many years now, since 2010. It's got a really cool nesting population of greater frigate birds, bigger than anyone I've seen anywhere else I've been. So it's a neat little spot. But in 2010, or 2009, I guess, they discovered a population of this guy, yellow crazy ant. You also hear it called the long-legged ant, Anapolepis gracilivus. It's really kind of pretty. When Alex Wild photographs it, it's really pretty. But you'll see later they're not so pretty. And they were just sort of in this area right here, like kind of in a confined, invaded area where you could walk with 3 people abreast, and the one on the inside would be in the invaded area and the one on the outside wouldn't, and it would be separated by 10 meters. So it was very distinctive where the invaded area was. The yellow crazy ant is super gnarly. It forms super colonies. It reaches extreme densities where they'll cover your feet. Their mouth parts aren't big enough to bite us, so you'll just be like covered in them. And so I don't really mind it, but my friend Cynthia King, who works at the state and also went to UH, for her grad degree. She walks around Johnston like this to try to kick them off her leg. We call it her Johnston dance. But so because of these extreme densities, birds must adapt their behavior, and that ranges from just shaking until they're exhausted to, I'll show you what else it comes to. It's awful, but a lot of times these areas are abandoned. So, whoops. Oh no, it's gotta play. How do I make
You
it
can play it on your laptop.
Yeah, I think I can do that. So this is an example of what it looks like within the colony. Oh no, it's not. Here, let's play it. Okay, we'll just see if that comes up.
There you go.
Okay. Can you guys see it? Ah! What was that? I didn't even see it.
You just minimize that screen.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's just try again. All three of them. There we go. Okay. So these birds are like ground nesting birds. So they're sitting there on, on the ground, and they're just getting swarmed in these ants. And so if you look closely, you can see like they seem to be going for the liquid, like in the eyes and around the nares. And the birds just, if they can't fly away, they just sit there and frickin' deal with this. And if they're a chick, obviously, they can't, there's no way to get away.
It looks really uncomfortable.
It doesn't look miserable. Like, I can't even watch this video anymore. It's so gnarly. Okay, let's go back to this. Okay. Okay, so also just to show what happens to chicks that grow up or hatch in areas where there's yellow crazy ants, some of which are on this island, like at Kaneohe Bay, or Mokuauia, which is Goat Island. We see wedge-tail shearwaters that are affected. And so this is a normal wedge-tail shearwater. Look at the color of its bill. It's got these nice symmetrical nares. They're in the Procellariformes for tube noses. They're able to excrete salt out of those tubes. So super cute, and this is what happens when there's like yellow crazy ants. So one thing we were seeing the last couple of years is some birds that had the skin on the eye totally grown over, like not even that slit anymore, totally grown over. And then there's all these abnormalities with the bill, yeah, like they're so crazy looking. And so we gave some carcasses to the vet, and the vet thinks that what happens is the ants are interested in the birds for moisture or whatever, and they spray them with formic acid, which affects the keratinization of the bill, so the development of the bill. And so that's our hypothesis. That's what we think is going on. And this is that bird's not even that bad. I could show you other pictures, but I have trouble looking at them now.
That one is not so bad, you said?
That one's not so bad. Some of them are really crazy. So, so obviously we wanted to kill them all, right? And it was in this distinct spot. It wasn't like on Oahu, it's sort of a mosaic where the yellow crazy ants are. It'd be really difficult to eradicate them on the main islands. But in a place like Johnston, where it was this one area, we decided to go for it. And so what we did is we used ant-specific pesticides, and we were able to reduce the numbers of yellow crazy ants to less than 1% of the original population. And a lot went into that I could talk about for 3 hours, about how we developed the methodology and monitored non-target effects. But if you want to talk about it, feel free to contact me. We're having a really hard time with this last 1%. Johnston is a freak show of an island, as I mentioned, and it's got these crazy underground structures that we can't get into because an atomic bomb went off or was spilled on the runway and there's plutonium spread all over it. So, I know. So we can't dig. So we want to try to find a way to deliver the baits underground, and that's where we're at now. And we're making a little bit of progress. You know, this has been ongoing since 2010. But the reality of the situation is we have been able to really control the ants effectively. The red-tailed tropic birds and wedge-tailed shearwaters have returned to the area. They're nesting at levels that they were prior to the invasion by the yellow crazy ants. The cons for this type of control is that we have to repeatedly apply this pesticide, and because there's less than 1%, you know, of the population of ants, they're not all just taking it up like they were originally. So there is some remaining on this island. This island's a friggin' toxic waste dump anyway, so, you know, we have this discussion a lot. We don't love that, but we don't know, we haven't been able to eradicate them, so we don't know what else to do until we're able to eradicate them. It's expensive to keep a crew out on the island year-round, you know, to do this work.
You said these ants can penetrate human skin, right?
Plutonium?
No, the ants they cannot penetrate.
Plutonium can't penetrate human skin, but the ants, yeah. They're pretty benign for humans, but when they are all over you, you can sometimes taste and feel the formic acid. It's fascinating. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Johnston. Did we return the community or ecosystem to a condition similar in ecological structure or function that existed prior to site disturbance or degradation? Did we achieve restoration on this island? What is restoration on this island? What do you think?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. Okay, so is it a condition similar in ecological structure and function prior to that existing, if we just think of disturbance as the invasion of ants?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then we
Sure.
achieved it. So, and that's an important point, right? What is your goal and what is your indicator of success? You have to point that out up front in your plan of attack. It has to be very, very clear, because goals for restoration are very different. And when people talk about, we're going to restore this in this kind of mythological, like dreamy way, we really have no idea how to do that. But we can, you know, take steps towards a more functioning ecosystem. Okay, so we were able to make habitats suitable for nesting seabirds, but large-scale restoration on that island is a low priority. Where the heck would we even begin, you know, with like labeling it a Superfund site or something? Okay, so now on to the third. What time do I need to be done?
20 past.
20 past, okay. I'm going to go through this quickly. Third case study, translocation of Nihoa millerbirds to Laysan. So translocation is another tool for ecosystem restoration that we've already mentioned. It can increase the size and range of populations, and it can also be used to resurrect lost interactions. So by using ecological analogs, as we talked about before. This is the island of Nihoa. I know one person in this classroom has been to this island, and that's Tim. And it is a magnificent, crazy island. The millerbird is only living on this island. It has high population variability. The island's really small. It's only 63 hectares. And of course, it's vulnerable to species introductions. It's really well preserved. It's the most well preserved island I've ever been to in the Pacific. And I think because it's so rugged and difficult to access. So we wanted to create a second population of millerbirds because this one is so tenuous, right? Oh, and I just had to put this in here. So Nihoa has all these really cool invertebrates because it's not as jacked up as the rest of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands and the rest of the main Hawaiian Islands. And it has stuff like this, an endemic giant trapdoor spider that's as big as your hand and really friendly. Okay. So yeah, we had some, there was a lot of concern about what we were doing because we were taking this population that lives on this island, steep, with very specific vegetation, and we were moving it to this island, which is a low island. It's got very different vegetation community. And that island is Laysan, the low one. It is relatively intact from a vegetation standpoint now, but it has lost a lot of components of its ecosystem, like all of its invertebrates and almost all of its land birds. So it had an apapane, it had a miller bird, the Laysan miller bird, same species, different subspecies as the Nihoa miller bird, and it had this Guam rail, which I always thought was like this big, like a regular rail, but I went to Bishop and looked at the specimens and it's this big. It's like this really cute little thing, or was. They're all extinct now. And that's mostly because this dude named Max Schlemmer decided to bring his family out to Laysan and mine guano and collect eggs. And then at some point he decided it was a good idea to introduce rabbits. And rabbits are bad. You might think they're cute and fluffy, but they're bad. And this is what they did to the island. Pretty much denuded the whole thing. So look closely at that picture, because this next picture I'm going to show you is from the same, vantage point many years later. Oh, that's like one Laysan albatross left. And that's what it looks like now. So Max and his homies got rescued off the island because they were about to starve to death, right? So then it was designated a wildlife, a sanctuary, and slowly over time it started to regenerate, and now it's really beautiful. It's been actively managed for many, many years, doesn't have many invasive plants on it. And so it was ready to support a miller bird population again. These are just some of the plants, we don't have to go over it. But so our objectives were to increase the population of the Nihoa miller bird and increase the range. And then our goals for habitat restoration were to replace or recreate ecosystem interactions. This is an insectivorous passerine, eats a bunch of bugs. We're hoping it's going to go back in and do what it's supposed to do. There's been a lot, I'm going to kind of rush through these, but there's been a lot of talk about, since the early 1900s that we should have been doing that because they knew it was going extinct. Sheila Conant, who some of you might know, was integral in that idea and pushing that forward. And then finally, there was an evaluation of translocation sites for Nihoa miller bird, and Laysan was obviously the most suitable because it already had a miller bird before. Our goal was to establish a self-sustaining population on Laysan. And what we did after about 5 years of prep, 5 years of research to make sure there was abundant prey on Laysan and an appropriate diversity of prey. And then we also did 2 years where we just kept birds on Nihoa in cages for about 10 days just to see if we could do it. And so in 2011, we moved 24 birds. And then in 2012, we moved 26 birds. And it's a long way. We were terrified that the birds were going to get seasick, or, we didn't know. It's the longest translocation of passerines ever attempted, 1,037 kilometers. So we went to Nihoa, we captured birds. You can see there's a mist net here. It was really easy. We had teams of 3. We had this super highly functioning, competent partnership. We were able to capture 65 birds over 3 days, and we were only keeping 24 in 2011 and 26 in 2012. All the capture locations were right around camp, which is right there, because we did a genetic analysis and we knew that birds from all over the island were basically genetically identical. So why kill ourselves to capture birds over here and get them back to camp? These are our aviculturists. They're extremely talented, so we have a bird in each of these cages. They were feeding them this nasty sludge of insects because we couldn't take live insects on island because of the quarantine, but the birds did fine. We had to basically rock climb down to get them to the landing and hope we didn't drop them in the water. It was crazy. And then we had a cabin in the vessel that was just for the birds that the captain of the vessel said it took him 2 years to clean up. And then we got them to Laysan, and to not go into too much detail, we were worried they were gonna get really skinny and get seasick and not make it, and they all ended up gaining weight. The joke was we were gonna put them on the ground and they were just gonna like waddle off. And then we put them at these that's Sheila releasing birds after, you know, however many years of thinking about this project. It was really cool to see. But we released them on those 3 sites up there, and this is all Naupaka, Scaevola, and they just dispersed into that, and they have stayed there. They've just started dispersing outside of that. We found a bird down here this year. So they just kept packing themselves in there. We followed them using these little transmitters that were glued on their back that lasted for about 2 weeks. And they were just a tiny percentage of the body weight. You can see it here. All of them had 100% survival until the transmitters fell off, so we felt okay using them. You can see all the flies on Cameron's hat. This is what we're hoping they're gonna eat. And this is kind of typically what goes on Laysan. You get harassed by all sorts of stuff. And we were shocked. We let them out, and within a few weeks, they were singing, they were pairing up, they were preening each other. They were starting to carry materials within 2 weeks of release to build nests. And then we had our first chick in March the 23rd. And they just kept packing themselves in up there. We had really good survival. You know, from the first year to the second year, we put 24 in, and then 16 survived. But the second year, we put 26 in, and all but one. No, I think all but one survived. And most of these here are still surviving today. And this is what the population looks like up to 2014. 2015, we got rescued twice off the island, and we want to talk about that trip. So we can't tell you what it is, but it does seem like it's, you know, they're doing well and they're starting to disperse. We're going to skip through the nesting success. Let's just say there's been a lot of it, and there's been some weird stuff. We've seen 3-egg clutches, which aren't known from Nihoa. We've seen females that are like over here feeding a fledgling with male 1, and then on the sly going over there and building a nest with male number 2. So it's been really fascinating. You know, they've been put in this area where they have unlimited resources and space, and they're just going nuts. And it's super fun to watch. These are the flies. We want them to die. They're native though. So in summary, Laysan's male overpopulation is growing. Birds are packing into the core habitat, and now we have one bird down south. Close monitoring has revealed previously unobserved behavior. And so this is an example where translocation is being used as a tool to reduce extinction and as a tool for ecological restoration. We don't really have time for the translocation spectrum, but this is, I guess the main thing is translocation. That term encompasses a lot of different things, including conservation translocation, population restoration, reinforcement reintroduction, conservation introduction, which is where you're translocating into into an area that is not within the native range of the species. And you're going to be hearing more about this as biologists moving into the future here. And so those conservation introductions are classified as either assisted colonizations or ecological replacements. So, have we restored Laysan? Have we returned the community or the ecosystem to a condition similar in structure and function prior to that existing before disturbance? Yes.
I would say no, because the Nihoa miller birds were never there to begin with.
That's right, they were not. Are we restoring a more functioning ecosystem by putting an insectivore back?
I guess.
Maybe we're inching in that direction, you know, but will we ever be able to like really restore Laysan? No, we're never gonna have the insects that are extinct back. Okay, and then the final few slides. Restoration in Hawaii. These are the take-home messages. If you haven't listened to anything else, listen to this. The endpoint isn't always clear. We have species extinction and huge data gaps. So identify your goals up front and early so that you can say whether your project is a success or not. There are obvious ways to make progress. Fencing, invasive species eradications. You know, Kaena is an obvious place where we made progress, and Johnston as well. As more species go extinct, we'll be faced with more difficult questions about conservation translocations. Function versus species. If there's no good habitat for the awala left on the Big Island, how do you feel about translocating it to Maui, where there was also a corvid, a crow? You know, think about that, grapple with that. Are you morally opposed to that? Are you more interested in ecosystem function, so you're okay with that? Those are things we have to think about. And then with that, questions. Yes. Yes.
Is Naupaka like the regular habitat for the miller birds, or is that just where they?
So we don't have Naupaka on Nihoa.
Right.
But they were using it. The subspecies on Laysan was using Naupaka. But the subspecies on Laysan seem more interested in Eragrostis, which they are not. The Nihoa subspecies is not currently using. Eragrostis is that bunch grass. So it's fascinating. We have all these bets among the partnership about when the first nest is going to be in Eragrostis. Anything else? Yes.
Wouldn't some argue that the Nihoa millerbird should, because the Nihoa millerbird was never on Laysan to begin with, that they shouldn't have been moved there? Because some might say, well, because they weren't there to begin with, you're actually interfering with Mother Nature's plan.
Of course.
They were never there.
And I would have said that back when I was 23 and moving to Rota in the Marianas. I remember being extremely opposed to the Guam rail being translocated to Rota, even though there were rails in the fossil record. So we didn't have anyone bring that up, but we were ready for it. And it comes back to the basic question, what are you interested in? Are you interested in having these pristine ecosystems that are exactly like they were before? And that might be possible in some areas of the world, or in Hawaii where it's not really possible because we've lost giant percentages of our species. Are you more interested in establishing functioning ecosystems? So that is the moral question. That is the big thing to grapple with. Other questions?
What happened to the rabbits? Who got rid of them?
The rabbits. So they all pretty much starved to death. And then,
So they just ate all the vegetation?
yeah, it was the same thing on Manana, Rabbit Island off Waimanalo. There were rabbits there, and they all just like eat, you know, they eat all the resources. Most of them starved to death, and then there's a few really sad rabbits left that you feel like it's mercy killing. So same story on Manana. Other questions? Yes.
How much do you expect the translocated population to grow before it levels off?
That's a great question. What's carrying capacity? And so we're at about 170 individuals, and they're using about 20% of the island. But that is that multi-layered Naupaka with Ipomea indica underneath, and lots of insects in there. So our feeling is some of the other areas on Laysan, they won't be able to pack in as much. But, you know, we expect, well, Chris and I have a bet about that too. But we expect probably at least tenfold increase. Yeah. Other questions?
Do you plan on introducing anything else, or is it just going to be?
Yeah, so what I would like to do on Laysan is put a rail that was similar and potentially an apopane, but those are so low in the priorities of, you know, we have limited amounts of funds and we have all these species going extinct. So that's probably way down the road, and, you know, something that we can think about, and it would be fun, and I know we could do it after doing this. but it's down the road. Our next translocation will be Nihoa finch, because it's only on Nihoa, and that might be a way to recover it. Yes?
You said the Nihoa millibird, they started exhibiting new behaviors never seen before on Nihoa on Laysan.
On Laysan, yeah.
Is there any concern that because these behaviors are different, that you never know, one day they could actually start becoming destructive and start harming the environment?
There was a big joke about, I mean, I guess it's not a joke, but it kind of was at the time, but what if they like start attacking the Laysan ducks or something? So we have an exit strategy.
We should probably.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
thanks,
you so
everybody.
much for letting me speak.